Thunder rolled over the timber roofs of Red Creek as dusk slid across the windows of the Half Moon Saloon, the panes rattling in their warped frames. Inside, lanterns hissed and smoke from cheap cigars drifted in sluggish ribbons that mingled with a sharper scent of spilled rye. Card players hunched around scarred tables tried to ignore the storm, but every bolt of lightning cracked the room open, flashing hard faces, cracked knuckles, and the glitter of coins. The barkeep, a barrel-chested man in grease-stained suspenders, slammed bottles faster than thirst could drain them. Each thud splashed amber onto the plank counter where a line of hungry-eyed miners elbowed one another for space. In that press of bodies stood 14-year-old Lena Anders, small, barefoot, skirts too thin for Wyoming's spring chill, wavering beside her stepfather like a broken sapling in a gale. She flinched when a gust shouldered the saloon doors. Wide and rain hissed in. All at once the lamps guttered, the piano coughed silent, and every gaze pinned the newcomer as though he were fresh meat. Her stepfather, Lars Anders, reeked of sweat and desperation. 2 weeks of prospecting had left him empty-handed. Whiskey had filled that emptiness until it leaked from his eyes. The last coins in his pocket clinked as he shoved Lena forward. "She's strong for her size," he slurred, smacking her shoulder. "Like a mule's rump." The men closest laughed, but the barkeep's brow furrowed. "We trade ore dollars here, not children." Lars dragged a hand across his unshaven jaw. "2 bottles of your best, Amos. She's yours." Laughter bloomed in the haze, part disbelief, part delight at the scandal, yet none moved to stop him. Lena stared at the warped floorboards, nails jutting like rusted fangs. Humiliation made her ears roar louder than the thunder. She remembered her mother's voice. "Hold your spine straight, girl, even when the world tries to bend you." But her mother had died last winter and memories could not brace shaking knees. She tasted the metal tang of fear when Amos set 2 bottles of Irish down with a reluctant scrape. The transaction felt unreal, like a nightmare that insisted it was morning. A voice, calm as a prayer in church, cut through the clamor. "I'll raise that offer." The stranger who had slipped in with the storm stepped from the shadows, water sliding from the shoulders of a charcoal greatcoat. He removed a gray Homburg, revealing a neat sweep of dark hair streaked with premature silver. His eyes, cool, slate blue, carried no whiskey glaze. Instead, they reflected the lamplight like cold steel. He set a folded parchment on the bar. 1 cask, paid in full on delivery. The barkeep unfolded the paper, and his jaw slackened at an ornate bank seal. Murmurs rippled. Lars blinked, confused, sensing the crowd's shift. "Showing off fancy ink don't mean nothing," he barked. The stranger dipped 2 fingers into a waistcoat pocket and produced a gold coin, spinning it on the pine counter, where it rang a pure, bright note. "Does this sing clear enough?" With that, he tucked the coin back as though it weighed nothing. The room hung between breaths. Then Amos nodded once. "Cask for the girl." Lena's stepfather swayed, greed, wrenched his features open. Yet pride stung him that another man could outbid him for his own property. "Who the hell are you?" he spat. The stranger's lips curved in a polite, almost apologetic smile. "John Barron." No one recognized the name, but his posture, ramrod, straight, unafraid, suggested a man who rarely explained himself twice. "You can take the cask from my warehouse at dawn." He turned to Lena, and the hard line of his mouth softened just enough to be mistaken for kindness. "Gather your things, Mississippi." She had none but the ribbon in her braided hair. Still, the quiet respect in his address pulled her chin up a fraction, and for the first time that night, she met someone's eyes without flinching. The miners nearest the bar didn't share Barron's calm. Whiskey and envy made careless men bold. A burly prospector named Hatch slapped his cards down and stood. "Ain't right a fancy gent buyin' children like broodmares. Let the girl pick her fate." A second miner, half masking jealousy beneath righteous scorn, blocked the doorway. Thunder cracked again, rattling glasses. Barron's gaze flicked across the room, measuring distances the way a surveyor charts land. With measured slowness, he unbuttoned his coat. A Colt peacemaker, polished, yet utilitarian, rested in a cross-draw holster. The subtle reveal drained heat from the air. Hatch's bravado wilted. He stepped aside, pretending interest in his empty glass. Barron gestured toward the door. "After you, Miss Lena." She hesitated only a heartbeat before sliding past the wall of silent bodies, following him into sheets of cold rain. Outside, torches sputtered along the muddy main street. A black carriage waited, wheels mired half a foot in mire, driver cloaked against the storm. Baron offered Lena his gloved hand. She accepted, expecting her skin to recoil from unfamiliar gentility, but the leather was warm, steady. A shout erupted behind them, Lars Anders stumbling from the saloon, anger and second thoughts wrestling in his bloodshot stare. "You can't just take her." Lightning illuminated the knife he brandished. Baron's driver leveled a shotgun from the box, twin barrels glinting. For a moment, the world froze. The hiss of rain, the thunder's belly rumble, Lars wobbling on one boot heel. He weighed life against pride, then dropped the blade with a splash and staggered into the dark. Baron opened the carriage door. Quickly, Lena obeyed, her bare feet sinking in mud before finding the iron step. The door shut behind them, sealing out the storm. Lamplight inside the carriage glowed amber, throwing soft halos across burgundy upholstery. Lena perched on the edge of a velvet seat, heart hammering as the wheels lurched free of the rut. Baron sat opposite, adjusting the curtains to shield them from prying eyes. Rain drummed the roof in frantic cadences while the team clopped northward. Only then did she notice details that contradicted every tale of rich men she had overheard. His boots bore no ostentatious silver, yet were shined to a mirror. The pocket watch he retrieved glimmered gold, but was free of ornaments save a tiny compass rose engraved on its lid. His gloves were stitched but patched at the thumb where rains had worn through. He studied the watch, then tucked it away as though time were an inconvenience, not a master. Lena's throat tightened. None of this fit the script of a rescuer or a villain. Why would a man of means troll backwater saloons at night? Why trade a cask of whiskey, worth a miner's season of wages, for a barefoot girl? Suspicion jabbed her ribs, but exhaustion dulled the sting. She hugged her elbows, shivering. Baron reached into a leather satchel and produced a woolen cloak embroidered with a discreet monogram JB. He offered it across the carriage. "Dry yourself before fever finds you." His tone was soft but carried the settled confidence of someone used to being obeyed. She hesitated. Every lesson life had taught warned against accepting gifts, but the cloak's promise of warmth defeated caution. She draped it around her shoulders, surprised at the faint scent of cedar and tobacco leaves. He poured hot coffee from a thermos into a tin cup and passed it over. The steam smelled like safety. Her hands trembled as she sipped, scalding her tongue in eagerness. Silence filled the space between them, not awkward but deliberate, as though he understood that words could bruise. The carriage wheels found a smoother rhythm on the north road, each clack a marker separating the life she had known from the one ahead. Rain softened to a hush. Lena traced the pocket watch's brief reflection in her mind. A compass rose, symbol of direction. Her stepfather had never owned a watch, nor cared for directions other than toward whiskey. Baron, too, was steering somewhere, yet his map felt hidden within his eyes. She dared a single question, whispered, "Where are we going?" He met her gaze with a steadiness that neither pitted nor threatened. "Somewhere the world can't put a price on you." The words were simple, but they cracked her chest like kindling. Hope flared, terrifying in its brightness. Outside, dawn's first pale streaks pressed against the storm clouds. Inside, Lena pressed the warm tin to her lips and tasted bitter grounds laced with something sweeter, promise, perhaps, or danger pretending to be promise. Either way, the road stretched ahead, and the compass inside a millionaire's watch ticked toward destinations she could not yet name. The wind screamed through the canyon like a living thing as the carriage rattled along the high mountain pass. Dawn crept over the ridgelines in thin silver ribbons, cutting through the pale sleet that lashed the horses and frosted the windows. In spiderweb crystals, the wheels groaned under the strain of the incline, grinding over stones that threatened to snap the axles. Inside, Lena sat curled in the coarse army blanket Baron had given her, her fingers red and stiff around the coffee tin she'd refused to let go. The night had passed in fractured, dozing fits, but every jolt and howl of wind had clawed her awake, reminding her she was nowhere near safe. Still, something about the way Baron sat across from her, alert, silent, always watching, kept her from sliding into full panic. Not safe, no, but not lost either. The path narrowed as they climbed higher, flanked by cliffs and jagged ledges slick with new snow. The driver called out a warning just as the road curved around a frozen bend, and the mountain answered with a growl. Above them, stone shifted. A clatter turned into a roar. Lena barely registered the echo before the world seemed to tilt. The carriage jerked sideways. Baron lunged, hand braced against the window, as the rear wheel lurched into a rut. "Hold tight," he snapped, his voice cutting through the chaos. She did, but the horses reared, nostrils flaring, hooves thrashing in panic. One lost its footing. The driver shouted, struggling with the reins as loose rocks avalanched down the slope. Baron flung the carriage door open and vaulted into the snow, his boots slipping for a split second before finding purchase. He raced to the lead horse, gripping the bridle and calming the animal with short, forceful words. Sleet whipped across his coat, and blood darkened the snow near the mare's fetlock. Nothing fatal, but enough to hobble a descent. Lena scrambled out behind him, feet sinking ankle-deep. She could barely hear over the storm and crashing debris. Behind them, the edge of the trail had disappeared beneath boulders. Returning wasn't an option. Baron's jaw was tight as he inspected the damage. "We unhitched the wagon. Just the essentials. Leave the rest." She didn't hesitate. Her hands shook from cold, but she followed his lead, helping unstrap the satchels and canvas rolls from the saddle. He gave her a quick nod, approval without words, and hoisted the packs over his shoulder. "This way," he said. There was no trail now, only scattered patches of snow broken by old game tracks. Trees clawed at the sky above, their needles dripping with ice, and the slope angled steeply downward into fog. Somewhere, a coyote howled. They hiked until Lena's legs burned and her fingers went numb, until her breath rasped in her throat. Still, she didn't complain. Eventually, Baron slowed near a jagged rock face carved with an overhang, just enough to shelter them from the wind. He tossed down his coat and struck flint to steel. The flame caught, sputtered, and grew into a small campfire that warmed the grotto with flickering light. Lena dropped to the ground, bone-weary and dizzy, her face chapped raw. Her boots, borrowed from the carriage trunk, had blistered her heels, but she didn't mention it. Baron handed her a strip of hardtack and a folded piece of oilcloth with dried apricots. She chewed slowly, letting the warmth of the fire thaw the corners of her fear. The quiet stretched between them again, not awkward this time, but steadying. In that glow, she watched the way Baron's shoulders never fully relaxed, as if some part of him remained always braced. The weight of unspoken things hung around him like his greatcoat. She looked into the fire, and a memory broke loose, her mother's voice. "Hush now, little willow. Wind can't bend what's already dancing." She used to sing that song while brushing Lena's hair before bed, back when the cabin had smelled of wood smoke and wild mint. Before the fever, before Lars, Lena could almost feel the worn quilt against her skin, the rhythm of her mother's humming. Tears gathered uninvited, and she blinked fast to hide them, but Baron didn't look her way. Instead, he removed a thin book from his satchel and began to write in it by firelight, small, neat lettering, as if recording the day's events. Lena studied him for a long moment. The man who bought her hadn't touched her, hadn't even looked at her with the wrong kind of eyes. She didn't trust him yet, not fully, but something in the way he stared at that fire, haunted, like he'd left parts of himself in too many places, made her believe he understood how it felt to lose a home. They didn't speak again that night, but when he handed her the blanket and gestured to the dry side of the fire, she took it. She slept, not deeply, but without flinching. The next day dawned darker than the last. Storm clouds roiled low over the ridgelines. By midday they reached a ridge known in local legend as Dead Man's Crossing. Baron slowed, placing a hand gently on Lena's shoulder to stop her. She followed his gaze. Figures, 3 of them, moved through the mist like ghosts. Not riders, but fast-moving, cloaked in ragged oilskins. One carried a rifle slung low. Another had a broad hat and a limp. Baron's hand slipped beneath his coat. "Keep behind me," he murmured. The wind dropped away as if holding breath. Lena stood stone still. From the rocks, the glint of a rifle barrel caught the weak sun for a blink. Baron didn't flinch. Instead, he stepped forward into the open, lifting one hand. The outlaws paused. A sharp whistle pierced the air. Then, as quickly as they appeared, the silhouettes vanished into the fog. Baron remained still a moment longer, then turned. They were scouts. Advance party, most likely. Looking for something or someone. Me? Lena asked, her voice a whisper. Could be, he answered, tone unreadable. But they won't find what they want up here. They moved quickly now, descending a rocky slope into the mouth of a long-forgotten silver mine. The entrance yawned like a wound in the cliffside, boarded once, now broken open. Inside, cold air wrapped around them like old breath. Baron lit a lantern, and they crept down the narrow shaft, boots echoing off stone. The air smelled of rust. Earth and long-gone labor that as they wound through the tunnels. Lena saw signs of the past, shattered picks, rusted buckets, and old etchings carved into beams. Baron stopped beside a timber post and ran his fingers over a name scratched deep. M.J. Baron, 1859. Your father? She asked. He nodded once. He dug here. Lost his life to a cave-in. This mine was his dream, his tomb. They sat in a small chamber at the rear. He handed her a canteen. For the first time, she noticed the tremble in his hand. Not fear. Pain. A memory that still bled. She handed it back carefully and extended her hand. Palm open. A moment passed before he took it, rough and gloved against her small fingers, but firm. Not a promise. Not forgiveness. Just understanding. In the flicker of that single lantern flame, something shifted between them. Not warmth. Not yet, but the hint of it. Trust beginning not with grand gestures, but with shared silence and surviving the road north. The carriage crested the last rise at sunset, revealing Silvercrest Manor perched against the bruised sky like a great ship run aground on a slope of dark firs. Turrets of gray-blue granite glimmered with frost. Stained glass windows caught the dying light and flared in emerald and ruby panes. As they rolled beneath an iron portcullis, Lena smelled pine sap and distant wood smoke. Inside, a hush swallowed every hoofbeat. No servants rushed forth, no dogs barked. Only the echo of the carriage wheels tremored through a marble foyer where a rose-colored skylight cast shifting petals onto the floor. A grand staircase spiraled upward, its banister carved with coiled serpents and cedar branches, yet layers of dust muted the shine. Lived in, but lonely. Baron paid the driver, then extended his hand. Lena stepped onto veined marble so cold. It numbed her soles, her gaze caught by portraits that watched from gilt frames. Stern women in high collars, men in frock coats clutching surveying tools. A draft whispered along in used corridors, and chandeliers clicked softly, as if remembering brighter days. Night settled heavy, and Baron left her in a vast library to choose any room that feels safe. Shelves soared to the rafters, there, ladders resting like tired sentinels. Oil lamps glowed amber, revealing dust dancing in the light. Yet safety was a word that scraped. She had been traded once, could be traded again. She paced the rug's woven constellations, suspicion tugging. Each step, her fingers found the small leather satchel she wore beneath her cloak, and, inside it, the braille-embossed Bible that had belonged to her mother. The raised dots, though meaningless to sighted fingers, calmed her. She traced them as she listened. For footsteps, for Baron's voice, for anything that would decide whether she should run. Every creak of the beams above made her flinch. She remembered Lars' ale-sour breath, the feel of rope pressing her wrists when he tried to drag her onto a peddler's wagon once before. Freedom could be yet another disguised at dawn. Insomnia drove her to wander the manors in used corridors. Behind an oak panel ajar, she discovered a study lined with maps. On the desk lay a stack of letters bound by twine, wax seals cracked. Curiosity outweighed fear. She loosened the knot. The first was dated 12 years prior, addressed to a Reverend Carter. Found two little ones near the pit mine. Brother dead, sister barely breathing. Sending funds for her medicine. I owe them that much. Another, to a Boston attorney, enclosed a bank draft for the reclamation and education of indentured boys on the Montana Rail Spur. The ink changed over years, wavering loops in early letters, steadier hand later on, but every page bore the same signature, J. B. Baron. A final, more recent missive revealed the truth she had only guessed at. Orphaned at 7, I survived on mine tailings and mercy. I will not stand idle while children are bartered like meal stock. If I must hide behind profit and rumor to do this work, so be it. A lump tightened Lena's throat. Baron, who the territory gossiped about as a ruthless metals baron, had instead forged his fortune into a quiet rescue network. She pressed the letters back into their bundle, heart pounding not with alarm, but with a dawning, fragile respect. Days stretched into a rhythm nothing like her Rivertown past. Baron, rarely idle, showed her the estate's modest stables, handed her a ledger, and with minimal words taught her columns of debits, credits, and shipments. At sunrise, she mucked stalls beside an aging Mustang with a torn flank. By noon, she tallied accounts at a roll-top desk that smelled of linseed and ink. Numbers began to soothe her. Columns marched neatly, unlike life. Evenings they rode the mountain trails, barren silent. Lena focused on the horse's cadence, until the valley blushed violet. No praise was spoken, yet one afternoon he left a set of kidskin gloves on the railing where she saddled the Mustang. The gesture fit him, practical, wordless. Trust grew like tree roots, slow, unseen, suddenly strong. On stormy nights she still woke sweating from dreams of auction blocks. But the manor no longer felt like a gilded trap. It felt unfinished, waiting for voices. Rumor, however, travels colder roads than commerce. One frosted morning a telegram arrived. Sam Riggs and 3 riders seen near Devil's Notch, asking after the whiskey girl. Lena's stomach nodded. She knew Riggs, a gaunt whiskey runner who owed Lars favors and collected debts in blood. Baron folded the telegram, jaw tightening. They think you're ransom. He armed the household with quiet efficiency. Lamps doused after dark, windows barred, a Winchester placed behind the parlor drapes. Yet resolve glinted in his eyes like the edge of a freshly honed blade. Silvercrest is no trading post, he told her as they latched the heavy doors. Lena squared her shoulders, pulse thrumming. Not prey this time, but a girl who could name the worth of a life and refuse the price. Wolves began to sing first, a mournful ripple threading through the timber as if the forest were warning its human intruders to flee. Seconds later, a rush of hoofbeats hammered the frozen ground, and flames blossomed at the far end of Silvercrest's paddock. The barn's dry shingles hissed, then roared upward in a curtain of orange that painted the manor's granite walls the color of molten iron. Sparks spiraled into the black, caught on a rising wind, and the horses screamed inside their stalls. Bandits in oilskin coats fanned out beneath the blaze, torches in one hand, carbines in the other. Sam Riggs rode at their center, profile lit devil red, his toothpick grin visible from the veranda. He raised a bottle of whiskey in mock salute and hurled it. Glass shattered against a fence post, and fresh fire snaked through spilled alcohol. From beyond the tree-line, the wolves' howls rose to a fevered chorus, as though predators of claw and gun had finally agreed on the hour of attack. Lena's lungs clenched at the sight, but fear lasted only a breath. She sprinted across the courtyard, braids snapping behind her, smoke stinging her nostrils. Inside the corral, the panicked horses collided against rails. She slashed the gate latch with a hay knife, then cut the main rope with a single, decisive pull. The animals burst out in a pounding tide, amber sparks flying from their hooves as they fled toward the snowfield. Coughing, eyes watering, Lena ducked beneath a falling beam and reached the tack room. Baron Spencer rifle hung where he'd promised it would be, if wolves ever walked on 2 legs. The stock felt heavy, real, utterly final in her hands. She jammed a cartridge into the breech the way he'd shown her, clicked the lever, and stepped back into the night. Cloak fringed with cinders on the veranda. Baron stood between 2 fluted columns. Winchester lowered but ready, lantern light gilding the lines of strain around his mouth. Riggs reined in just beyond pistol range, wolves of men forming a ragged half-moon behind him. "Evening, Mr. Millionaire," he called. "Heard you bought yourself a girl that ain't for sale." Baron's reply came calm but lethal. "You set foot past that red maple, and you'll learn how many graves this hill can hold." Riggs laughed, twirling his revolver by the trigger guard. "You think money and marble keep the wild out? I got debts to settle, and the Anders chit is the coin." Baron advanced a single step, rifle rising. You want whiskey payment? He tossed a small cask into the snow. It split, liquor pooling like liquid topaz. Drink that in hell. A shot cracked. Riggs' warning round, splintering the porch rail. Baron fired back. Riggs flinched, but returned 2 rounds. Echoes clapped off the stone facade. A third report snapped louder than the rest, and Baron staggered. Crimson spread across his right shoulder. He shifted the rifle to his left hand, teeth bared, determined to stand anyway. Lena, heart lurching, saw Riggs lever his carbine for the kill. Smoke still curled around her, but purpose cut through terror like sunrise through fog. She vaulted onto the wounded Mustang she'd nursed for weeks, its flank scar tight but usable, and kicked it toward the fight. The horse lunged beneath her, hooves shredding icy earth. She aimed the Spencer one-handed, felt its kick jolt up her arm, and sent Riggs' hat spinning into the dirt. The bandit leader wheeled, shock flicking across his thin features as the whiskey girl charged him head-on. Another bandit tried to grab her rein. The Mustang reared, iron shoes slashing the night. Lena closed the distance, swung low from the saddle, and slammed the rifle stock across Riggs' wrist. His revolver skittered away. He grabbed for her braid, too late. She leveled the rifle point blank at his chest. Silence fell, broken only by the crackling barn and the horse's distant thunder. Riggs' breath ghosted in the cold air as he waited for judgment. Lena's finger found the trigger, but something inside her refused the final inch. To end him would be to carry him forever. She exhaled, flipped the rifle, and smashed the barrel into his knee instead. Riggs crumpled, screaming. She dismounted, kicked his gun farther, then stepped away, offering the Mustang's reins to Baron, who pressed his uninjured hand to his bleeding shoulder. Their eyes met, hers fierce with new power, his shining with something like pride. Wordlessly, she bound his arm with her cloak strip while the remaining bandits scattered into the timber, chased by the howls of real wolves now drawn by blood. And feared by dawn the fire lay in smoking ribs, and snowfall began covering the ugly night with clean white. On the veranda, Baron, pale but steady, handed Lena an envelope sealed in blue wax. Guardianship papers, he said. If you wish to stay, Silvercrest is yours to learn and to lead. But if your heart rides beyond these peaks, a train ticket to the Philadelphia Women's Academy waits inside, paid in full. Lena turned the envelope over, feeling its weight. Choice, pure and terrifying. She thought of her mother's lullaby, of ledgers balanced and wounds stitched, of sunrise over snowy ridges. I'll take the schooling, she whispered, but the manor stays home, for others who need it. Baron's smile was thin yet luminous. They clasped hands, no longer rescuer and rescued, but partners in a promise. Lena faced the camera of dawn, breath clouding. Frontier roads are rough, she said softly, but every step can carry you further than any price tag ever set. If resilience moves you, like this tale, share your own in the comments, and ride back here for the next journey. Subscribe and ring that bell so you don't miss the sunrise.